is all mine.
Yeah.
Recording is on.
I wouldn't have missed this for the world.
All right.
Hi.
So today is June 24th, 2021, and we're going to continue our discussion on the Desiderata Extinctionati. And we're joined today by Spencer McCall, who directed the Jejune Institute and On Bright Axiom. And today we have him because we're interested in knowing more about ARGS and just about that those concepts. So I'll start it off. Hugh, do you have any questions you want to start off with?
Yeah. I mean, I got to do a little spiel here because I don't know how many people have told you this, but in your life, but you've certainly been responsible for directing the last 10 years of my life. So let me tell you my story. So I was a green tech entrepreneur and basically an activist, climate activist, and I was looking for, rebellion and social change and ways to reinvent it, particularly after the failure of all these things like the Occupy movement and the Arab Spring and stuff. And I was thinking, the Gene Sharp kind of methodologies, all these kind of nonviolent Gandhi tactics, MLK and stuff. It's just not working. Nothing is working. There's, we desperately need social change. We need a revolution, and we just can't get there with these traditional techniques that have been developed by activists for so long. And so, I was roughly thinking of ARGS. And I came across the Institute movie because it was just part of my research into ARGs. I had a vague notion that you could use an ARG. But my real moment of epiphany was watching the Institute. And the exact moment of my epiphany was when there's this one scene you might probably remember where you're interviewing this girl who participated in the game. And she's talking about the planet elsewhere. And she bursts into tears right in the middle. And I thought, that's incredible. I mean, I can't think of anybody that would burst into tears about solar panels or Green New Deals or, the polar bears or the whales. And here's this bizarre fictional world that she's so devoted to, she just basically breaks into tears. So I've had a background in cults and stuff like that. I'm deeply immersed in that kind of thing. I suddenly made the connection. I thought, this is it. That you can do world-changing stuff with this. And then I gather that Jason Segel, is that right? Segel? Jason Segel. Yeah. He also must have been on the same wavelength because he came out with the AMC dispatches from elsewhere. So that's my story. Do you have anything to say to that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to get dour or anything, but Kiyomi is the person we're interviewing during that. And, we wanted to play with reality, and a lot of people accused at times everybody in that of being an actor. There are a couple interviews that are actually, there's only one interview that is an act or a plant. Somebody to just blur that line to get you to question what's real and what's not. Kiyomi was not one of those people. She was a real participant who, named her dog Jejune.
I got the feeling she wasn't acting. Yeah. I don't think anybody's that good an actor. Right?
I mean, for a long time I didn't want to give away who was the plant, but it's the guy who claims to break into the house and go into the sewer, and that was part of the experience. But everybody else is real, including the guy in the wheelchair who wanted his face blurred. But Kiyomi was real. She named her dog Jejune. She got a tattoo of some of the nonchalance symbology. And while the story was important to her, what she really was breaking down about was like those moments of coincidence and what they mean. And for me, coincidence has always been kind of these forward-looking breadcrumbs where I feel like I'm very agnostic. I'm not a theist in any way, raised Jewish, but kind of gave that up, as with many people who got involved in this. And I can come back to that in a second. But I love the idea that when I'm ever curious if I'm on the right path, I get these glimpses of coincidences or maybe even deja vu, but just these moments that snap me out of reality and put me in this headspace of there being the potential for magic, when really so much of our lives is spent, driving from point A to point B. I've got to go mail this letter. I've got to do this. And life for a lot of people, especially disenfranchised people, can just be, what is the point of this? What are we doing? Life is miserable. It's a lot of suffering. And maybe there are these moments of connection to a clue or connection to another human being that can be so valuable. And so, yeah, with Jason, a couple years after it had come out, and we just really had no idea like how it would resonate. We just knew it kind of, these themes of resonance meant something important to us. But Jason, yeah, he saw it. We were lucky enough to get on Netflix, which at the time, they didn't have a lot of original content, so they were sweeping up indie stuff, and we were really, really lucky. I don't think they do that quite as much anymore, but it was just this happy series. Almost the entire process after the whole thing was done was this process of these happy accidents, luck, and coincidences that brought it to Jason Siegel, or his attention, and he asked to meet, and came. At the time I was living in the Bay Area. I'm in LA now, but he came and met, and we just had this wonderful conversation about Kismet, and just, these little connections that you get to make, and you get to make with other people. And how for a lot of people in our lives, it's hard to make a social connection. It's hard to, make a friend. And what we kind of realized was like one tool or technology for making like an actual spiritual or personal relationship was to give people a shared mission. I feel like you could, to just put it in terms of like dating or something, you could go on a dating app and you can set up a date, and you can, sit there kind of awkwardly and try to like make something happen. But I think a more powerful way to establish a relationship with anybody, whether it's a friendship or romantic or, or even a business colleague, is to have a shared mission, have a shared goal, have a shared objective, and to learn about each other through this one goal. And that was kind of the beauty of how things worked. I know, like, for me, most of my friends came from collaborating on projects together, and it wasn't this like joking around, kind of just sitting there. So that was something that was really, really important, and it meant a lot, I guess, to Jason. And then at the time, we were working on a new kind of experience called the Latitude Society, which I then did In Bright Axiom about. And we said, basically, Jason, we can talk and wax poetic about this, but why don't you experience this, and let him go through the whole experience. And a happy little 5 years later, the show came out right at the start of the pandemic, which I don't know if that's Kismet or what, but a show about going out and exploring the world and leaving your home and meeting strangers came at a very precarious moment in human history, I think. Yeah. So.
Yeah, but so instead of Kismet, what do you think about Jungian synchronicity? Do you go that deep, or?
I mean, my father was a architect and was very into Jungian like symbology, and I know really the creator, the headmaster of all of this and all this world is Jeff Hall, who is just a scholar on symbology. And I mean, I do believe in the power of, just on an everyday purpose or everyday level, what does a logo of a company, what does that elicit in you, especially when we think about these kind of modern day hieroglyphs that we see and may elicit some kind of like Marcel Proustian memory. The Coca-Cola symbol. Everybody on this call, Coca-Cola was around, 80 years before any of us were born. We've grown up with it. It's never changed. It has connotations to it, whether it's negative or positive. But I think by taking certain symbols that we see every day and subverting them, just through design or whatever, by subverting those symbols, I don't care if it's a crucifix or crescent moon or Star of David. If you subvert those in certain ways, you can maintain some of the emotional baggage that people have with those while leading them into new directions. So it's kind of this mental jujitsu, I guess, where it's like you're using somebody's own strength to move them into a direction that you want. And that's why I'm really reticent to ever, attack somebody who's like a QAnon believer or something. The way to get those folks to maybe wake up is use their strength and help guide them without them even knowing you're doing it, guide them into a more constructive path. And so, there's a lot of that, especially in Bright Axiom. We played a lot with, the power of symbols and tokens and what those mean. And what does a hexagon mean? Why do we see it in nature? Why is a beehive, 6 sides? And why do we, I don't know, just a million examples of that. But one thing we've been thinking a lot about recently, or at least I have, and I've had some conversations with Jeff about it, was sort of this idea of, when the Jejune Institute first launched in 2008, it was this very novel thing. I mean, there had been ARGs before that were intended to basically give people an experience to promote a product, a movie, a video game. I Love Bees.
Halo 2, Halo 2 and stuff,
the Halo 2 is I Love Bees. There was a good one for the Batman movie, which actually, The Dark Knight, which actually was really funny because that was happening simultaneously to the launch of Jejune in 2008. But what was kind of interesting, I guess, about Jejune is there was no intention, there was no end point, there was no go buy the thing at the end of the road. It was simply like, this is a story, and this is a way to open up your eyes and experience the world in ways that you forgot how to do, at least since you were a child. Use your imagination and take back your city in constructive ways. But yeah, I mean, one thing I've been thinking a lot about recently is, in 2008, there was a lot of hope, at least in the US. We're about to get this amazing, hopeful new president. The world was kind of calming down a little bit. And maybe, I'm not trying to get political or anything, but maybe we're approaching that again, this kind of shared stasis, shared reality where, we've rejoined the Paris Climate Accord and there is hope and COVID is winding down. Peace is always temporary. There will be some other catastrophe. And my thought has always been, I don't know if you share it, but my thought has always been, if we thought, the pandemic was end times, when it comes to climate change, we haven't seen anything yet. And it's going to be bad. I mean, right now in California, it's the worst drought in recorded history, or at least we're approaching that right now. So my kind of headspace right now is not really in creating ARGs, and I don't even know if it ever necessarily was in terms of that language. Like, these weren't really games. They were almost like more guided tours, almost in the way that you would go into a museum and put on a headset and or walk down a city and put on a headset, like in Boston, and it's like, this is where Paul Revere, lived, and tell you all these fun facts about it. My thinking right now is in creating DARGs. How do we de-augment reality using the same technology of an ARG, but to get everybody just a little pinch closer to consensus reality? And maybe one way to do that is to not necessarily tell them that the world is not what it seems, but to tell the world that the world is maybe better than it seems, or it could be. Because I would just love, in the last 4 years, society's come up with these terms of alternate facts, and it's like, oh God, that word is supposed to be our word, like alternate is
hijacked, completely hijacked.
Yeah, it was totally hijacked by the wrong people. And the Q folks, again, I don't want to demonize them. I think they were super misled, and they got caught up in the power of story and the power of community by finding each other. And those are powerful. I just think the story that was being told to them was, I mean, obviously ridiculous, but it's fine to have a story that's ridiculous, as long as it doesn't cause somebody to go into a pizza parlor with a machine gun or try to like kill 5 Capitol Police in an insurrection. Ours was always about trying to find the beauty and magic of the world. And as Jason Segel refers to the whole thing, it's beauty as an act of defiance, and I think their thing was more like, I don't know, drinking blood. We have to take down, I don't know. It's just like insanity. It's like really macabre, dark stuff that is not, in my mind, something I want to explore.
Yeah, all Satanists and pedophiles and stuff. But so, it doesn't go there pretty easily. In an ARG, it has a tendency to kind of go into the occult quickly. People start, getting apophenia, seeing connections and stuff. And they take it there, don't they? They take it to the paranormal. There's something in people that just wants to go there, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, supernatural, paranormal, and science fiction, those are fun things, but I think they're really fun when you can actually, it's hard to define exactly, but it's like you can lose yourself in the story, but also walk out of the movie theater and know that aliens aren't about to attack us. But sometimes for some folks, if you literally augment reality too much, you can, that line between the proscenium and, not the proscenium, it's one, and it's really kind of fun to get wrapped up in paranormal and the occult and science fiction, because so much of what the QAnon thing is, and I don't mean to keep going back to them because it's I feel like that one's winding down a little bit as well, which I'm hopeful about. But it's just so much of it is science fiction. It's like scientifically impossible for these things to happen, and that's also something that I'm really interested in as well. I just I don't know, there's a lot of people who have studied the Q phenomenon a lot more than I have. And at the end of the day, I'm really not so much of a like game designer or, alternate reality person. I like to make films, and, and part of like one of my next doc films is it's just a straight doc, kind of in praise of science, but also weird science, and kind of getting people to see that science itself not only is reality or hopes to be reality, it's the pursuit of reality, but it can be stranger than fiction. So I'm working on this thing about dog cloning and pet cloning, which is a real thing around the world. And hopefully if people can...
in Korea, they've done it. Yeah, they've done human cloning. Basically, the designer babies now from this Chinese guy.
Well, yeah, but I mean, that's kind of my point, is you don't need to escape into fiction to see how bizarre our reality is at times. And if you love science fiction, wait till you take a deep dive into, the strange oddities of how reality works, So what I'm interested in now is these like stranger than fiction moments, and using those to get people to latch on to the pursuit of reality and truth.
Yeah, I can tell you of a few of those. What comes to mind, there are lots of, fascinating but forgotten stories in science. And one of them that is completely out of the public purview, but I think is a fascinating story, was the pursuit of absolute zero. So all these guys like Kamala Nonis and stuff like that, they liquefied helium, and they carried on going down the periodic table, liquefying things. And it was like the space race of the the early 20th century, and it's completely forgotten now. But the story was epic, with exploding machines and disasters and people that just devoted their whole life to it, and it was an international race, and it's completely forgotten. But I advise you to look into common unknownness and.
That I love it. I absolutely will, because I think you could take an entire ARG, or you could create one and do it with those hidden gems of science and history that are totally forgotten. There's so many moments like that, and maybe you don't need to invent an entire fake world. You just need to create one that is real but so unbelievable that your brain goes to that same technology of an ARG to think, oh, well, this couldn't have happened, and then you go deeper and you go, oh my gosh, this did happen. An example of that was, and this is probably something we wouldn't do in this day and age, but the idea of the Institute was, there's this girl that went missing in 1988, 20 years ago from when it launched. And, there were enough clues and moments that were really well crafted to get a lot of the people saying, I actually think this whole thing is just to find this actual real person. The real person, or the Ava character, is based on kind of an amalgam of people that Jeff knew, some of them did just kind of disappear off the face of the earth, but there was no real like Ava necessarily, but there was just enough of that truth to get people invested. But what if you gave them an absolute truth? So an example being, I don't know if you saw 3 billboards outside Ebbing, Missouri with Frances McDormand, but her daughter goes missing, and she puts up these billboards because nobody's doing anything about it. Well, those billboards, in a sense, are augmenting reality, augmenting people's scope of what reality is. And maybe you can do the same. Like, if nobody's looking for your daughter, or nobody's working to help do anything about climate change, maybe you can augment reality in order to get them to that point Z without them ever knowing necessarily, when they go down that rabbit hole, that, oh, I'm here to basically help build more desalination plants or more solar or anything like that. It's like you're starting down this rabbit hole. You don't know where it's going to go, but along the way, you're actually learning things that will take you to a constructive output. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, like Jejun and the Institute, it didn't have necessarily a socio-political call to action. At the end, it was literally like, look, you've all come together. You wouldn't have met each other. And that in itself is beautiful. But I think for your initiatives, the output, the buying the Reese's peanut butter cups or the video game at the end of the tunnel for you could be whatever climate initiative you think is best.
So we've done political stuff like, kind of riffing off Eva is Lost Boy campaign, where basically we have just a picture of Lost Boy. Lost Boy happens to be the real Dalai Lama, who's kind of disappeared in China. So anybody that actually takes it seriously, goes for the QR code, goes down this rabbit hole that is for real. They have a fake Dalai Lama that the CCP has created and stuff. So it's political dynamite for China. But, you just have this picture of this kid and stuff, and people think, oh, maybe it is a lost kid, and do a little Google image search on the thing, and they'll find out this, what? Why doesn't anybody talk about this story?
Exactly.
So big opportunity for political activism. But do you know about Vladislav Surkov and the stuff that he did in the Soviet Union?
It sounds familiar, but no, fill me in.
Well, that's fascinating stuff, because he's taken really the whole ARG concept, and Putin stays in power largely because they call it active measures, but it came from Western psyops that were developed since World War One, and it is an ARG. It's basically, and so he comes from the avant-garde theater world, and he applied all these techniques to Putin in Russia, and then they've weaponized them and used them in the Ukraine, and for they do it very, very well. Adam Curtis mentioned it in a documentary of his. He did very good treatment. Adam Curtis, if you don't know him, is this English documentary maker. A BBC documentary maker, and he seems to have access to the BBC library and a very, very good memory. So he hauls out all these gems from the BBC archive.
Of course, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yes, I know exactly.
Oh yeah, he has a cult following. It's
he did a big release a couple years ago that kind of almost became viral. I know exactly.
The Power of Nightmares or hypernormalization. I think the big.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Surkov is in the hypernormalization one. So I would highly recommend going back and looking over that stuff, because this, I mean, the number of people that have figured out this ARG format and as a weapon, and in fact, all the Q guys, I was really upset by all of that, because I've been working on this for 10 years, in essence, to do what they did on the left, and yeah, I really felt pipped at the post as like they did in 10 years. I mean, they did in 2 years, and with $4 million, what I've done, just financed myself over the last 10 years. But anyway, you're completely guilty, because you set me up on that part. Jeff,
I'm sorry. I mean, in many ways, I'm kind of the propaganda, slinger of this world. Like, I fell in love with it. I got to help build the video installations for the original piece, but when it was over, even working with them and Jeff and everybody involved, I still had so many questions, and that's when I kind of was like, I want to investigate this. I want to really put this together and understand what this meant to people and why it resonated so as much as it did. But yeah, that's really fascinating.
I can help you, fill you in there, because my most formative years as a kid, from about 15 on, was spent in a cult. In fact, my mom studied comparative religion, and she did her thesis on my experience in this cult that's still going. It's kind of worldwide, but it doesn't really have the power that it used to. I think the main kind of
what was it? Was it
the Church of Economic Science in the UK? But there's a book that was written about it called The Cult in the 80s. But it was very influential when I was in it in the 80s. There was, I think, Maggie Thatcher had a couple of guys in her cabinet that were in it. So it got into the news. They got found out and got into the newspapers, and they were like, secret cult has influenced. Cabinet was the main theme, and so there was a lot of controversy at that time. But from that experience, I absolutely adore cults, because it's just so awesome to be in them, and from the latitude, right? You know exactly the dynamic. So I've spent my whole life kind of unpacking my experiences in that cult, and they've never gone away, because almost everything, as far as I can tell, is a cult. I mean, I worked in American corporations. I've made my own corporations, and I tell you, they're cults. They're all cults. I mean, nobody recognizes it, but they are. They all have the dynamics of a cult. And so I made a study out of cults, and then it's just what an ARG is a cult just updated to all the tools of the digital age. It's really all it is. But every experience that I've had in that cult, the School of Economic Sciences, is what you guys are doing. I can see play it straight out in the latitude. But I've been kind of fascinated by it, because I can see there's something deeper in it. There's you can see maybe it's the tip of the iceberg, especially with Jeff Hull. I think he's holding something back. He has a much deeper agenda, and you can see in interviews and stuff, he'll go so far, but there's a lot more to this than he's actually saying.
I mean, his go-to quote is always, I can remove the curtain, but behind that, there's just another curtain, and so on and so on. And I think that speaks to who he is a little bit. Definitely,
he's definitely an onion there. He doesn't peel back many sheaves of the onion. But yeah, so if you have any doubts about what happened in the latitude, I can definitely fill you in on the territory and how things unfold. But I've read the stuff on like Mother Jones and stuff, but why did the latitudes unravel? And I mean, a lot of people were really upset and traumatized that it unraveled. And I think Jeff Hull took a bit of flack for that because he did it rather abruptly and just removed all the funding, right? So what's your take on the unraveling? So, well, let me charge you with this. Why it was so cool and why it turned so bad, which was what Jeff Hull was saying in his kind of valedictory letter to everybody. He said, it's amazing how something was created for fun and whimsy and stuff turned out to be a trauma for so many people. So how do you answer all of that?
I mean, there's a lot of components, and to be honest, it's hard to get a lot of those people to actually give the specifics necessarily of what it was that was so rough. But what I do know is, it's very possible that we were kind of, it's like, I think as Jurassic Park says, it's like a kid finding their dad's gun a little bit and not exactly knowing what to do with it, but knowing all of a sudden I have this very powerful tool and it could go off at any moment. And part of what the Latitude's design was as I mentioned earlier, I think a lot of people who gravitate towards this, or I could even talk about Q a little bit because there's a lot of like Judeo-Christian undertones to it, and like kind of these end times Book of Revelations things.
More than that, theosophical and stuff. It goes into esoteric, occult Nazism and stuff like that.
Yeah. And so part of what was done with the Latitude was for a lot of the folks that got involved, more so I think than Jejune, was these were people, myself included, who had grown up with some form of a religious upbringing and had kind of abandoned it at some point in their life. Maybe it's moving to a coastal city or whatever, and the technology of the Latitude was very much using the tools and rituals and moments from kind of augmented reality, like augmented theology, I'd put it. So, there's the Eucharist and drinking the blood of Christ and all of that stuff. And then basically what we did was, and I think it's even worded in the doc, but it's like, these were people who found an environment where they could be religious but not spiritual, where they could say, I love ritual, I love congregation, I love this, I haven't had this since I was a little kid. And therefore, you're also kind of playing with this strange sense of like nostalgia, but it's a latent nostalgia that I think it's not like, oh, I love watching Star Wars, I love Chewbacca, I'd love to see him again. It's kind of this latent, unspoken sense of both nostalgia and theological longing, and congregation, ritual, again, coming together for a shared purpose, which can be very, very powerful. And, you speak of cults, you could make the argument that everything is a cult, but I think sometimes what should differentiate a cult from a religion, and I'm not talking about Catholicism or Buddhism, but because a lot of them have a central figurehead, but the idea of decentralization of, I guess, the book itself being your axis mundi, the center of the world, the universe, you know. And with cults, they're usually, at least the nefarious ones that we always hear and see documentaries about, they're cults of personality. And I don't think necessarily Jeff wanted to be that, although that's what he became for a lot of people. He was this mysterious man behind the curtain. And he was bleeding money. And there, I think, were a number of folks who were upset at the way that that was being handled. And I think he was getting, you know, stressed about it. And it's kind of like, what if one day the Pope said, sorry, Catholicism's done now, like close every church. That's not going to happen. But because this was such a small climate of people, you know, that could happen, especially if it's the Pope who's paying the rent on each one of those churches and is draining a whole lot of money. I'm not overly trying to, you know, defend the rapid shutdown that happened. But at the same time, I mean, you know, I've been laid off of jobs before. I've never had a job where the boss or the owner says, okay, in 3 weeks, we're going to lay you off. You know, it's always an immediate thing. And that's not to say that a lot of the people who were, you know, upset hadn't had experiences with that before. But I mean, at the end of the day, I think there was a lot of stress and he was bleeding money and, you know, shut the doors immediately. And I think Jeff would be the first person to say, you know, that was probably a mistake, or it could have been handled better. I think it was going to shut down no matter what, but it could have been probably handled better. And that kind of goes back to my thinking now about that kind of emotional jujitsu that you do. Okay, so the insurrection at the Capitol failed, but because Q didn't have that one person necessarily, although I guess there is a Q, that one person funding everything, there was no way to shut it down. And I think actually what's happening with the whole Q thing right now is almost a little bit more healthy in how it's ending, because had it been shut down right away, there would have just been some other conspiracy about, oh, the government did this, now we really have to attack. And now is like really all hell breaking loose. But because they keep having these kind of deadlines of things that they think are going to happen that keep getting pushed out and out, I think the next one's supposed to happen in a few weeks where Trump is going to re-enter office. You know,
the storm. Yeah.
The storm. It enables
another failed prophecy.
Right. And there'll be a million of those. I mean, anytime there's a doomsday theory, whether it's 2012 or that religious group who put flyers all over the Bay Area saying end times on like May 23rd of 2009, you know, end times are always going to be
that's
coming.
Leader 101 is don't put a date on your end time. big fucking mistake. Rookie mistake.
Rookie mistake. But
keep it vague.
But that's
the end time's coming. It's got to be right round the freaking corner. But yeah, don't put a date on it. You have to pass that date at some stage.
Exactly. And I mean, by shutting down the latitude, if he had put a date on it, I don't know, would that have then enabled a lot of the people involved to say, oh, well, I have hope. It's not going to shut down then, or it is, or if it doesn't, then another 2 months. We've got another 2 months or something like that. But what's healthy, I think, right now is just this very slow trickle out and dissolve of Q members where it's like, man, I was told January 6th. Like, I knew that in my heart. Okay, I know the next date's coming. I'll wait for that. But my belief is going to dwindle a little bit more. So I think you just don't want to pull the rug out from anyone, you know.
In my experiences and, you know, a serial entrepreneur and stuff is I've had to close down small companies and stuff of about 30 people. And so, there's no nice way to do it. In fact, I would recommend doing it the way Jeff did it, because you can really string out the agony. Because yeah, a small company also is a cult. It's basically people only join a small company by sort of religious conviction. So you know, they will do anything. They will bleed on the floor to keep it going. And at some stage, you just say, look, you just got to take this Band-Aid off and rip it off quickly. So, did Jeff share with you that he was bleeding with the capital? I think I got the impression that he didn't share the finances enough. So everybody was like playing along, and they didn't realize that it actually cost money. He was kind of, he wasn't really upfront about that. And then suddenly, you know, everybody's thinking, hey, this is the internet. It's free, isn't it? Like everybody thinks everything's free today. You know, they like wouldn't pay for bullshit. You know, it's like you know, I started a couple of years ago to get my ARG going. I started making movies as a complete rank amateur, and it shows. Oh, by the way, on YouTube. And I never respected filmmakers like you before I made one. Afterwards, now I'm like, oh, huge respect. I'm sorry I doubted you. You know, it's like, but for the average dude, they expect so much for free. Like it's very hard to fund these things. But so anyway, I'm wrapping on. But
there's no such thing as a free lunch. I mean, that's the thing that the internet
there is to the internet audience, right? But everybody on the internet, everything's free.
Well, but see, that's the hope. But the reality is, no, there isn't. So for me, it's like if I'm going to use Facebook, I'm going to assume they're going to use my data. Like how do I mean, yes, or I could just get barraged with ads, I guess, and that's their revenue model. I mean, that's fine, but I've never believed in a free lunch. You know, there's always a catch.
Well, if you're a creator, then you know what it is to starve and not get paid for your work. So yeah, but for the consumers, they've just been, you know, since the beginning of the internet age, because there were so many startups and they're all competing for mind space and just market share, then they all offered a freemium model. And so we've had 20 years where nobody had to pay for anything. That didn't used to be the case. If you bought a newspaper, you had to pay for it in the old days.
Yes.
Now everybody thinks newspapers, they're free, aren't they? It's like, no, actually, people have to get paid.
Well, but, I mean, maybe some places are kind of learning that lesson. I mean, the New York Times, if you want to read it, you need a subscription to it. It's like, we're not going to rely on advertising. That's not how this works. And we're not getting your 50 cents every Sunday. So that's how this is going to have to work at this point. And yeah, I mean, it's just so fascinating. It's almost, you know, what's an alternate reality is market valuation. You know, the idea that
the stock market,
the stock market, I mean, that is just illusion. And it's real in that, yes, you can sell and you can then go buy, you know, whatever that's tangible, something you can hold. But just the idea that, you know, Twitter has never been making any money and it's valued at, you know, whatever, $10 billion or
Tesla.
Uber.
Tesla would take 1,000 years to basically earn a revenue back on its market cap. It's like, what are these people thinking? It's just fantasy. Yeah.
It's just kind of fantasy, but we just kind of go along with it. And in that case, I mean, maybe there's no such thing as an alternate reality game or group.
Okay, so I'm not giving up on this one. Let me tell you this. So after I saw the Institute and thought this is the way to go, I got a bit of misinformation somehow. And it was in my research, basically, I found how was this financed? Was the first thing. I was like, some business brain, right? So the bit of misinformation I got was that it was a 10 grand art project, and it was done on a shoestring. And then when the money was gone, that was the end of the project. I sort of realized now that, you know, that wasn't correct. I think Jeff Hull pumped 2 million into it and stuff. It was maybe much more than that. Well, no, at least 40 grand or something, isn't that, into the Institute movie? The production costs were low, but they were on a shoestring.
Well, so are you referring to the film itself or the actual full experience? Because they're sort of two different things.
The Jejune Institute, when it started with the Jejune. The Jejune part of it was done on a shoestring, wasn't it? It was Latitude. Then Jeff put in about 2 million, didn't he?
I think it's actually closer to 3 million of his just personal equity or private investment. Jejune was much cheaper, and something that was really smart about it was that it was intended from the very beginning to be a not temporary, because I mean it lasted for 3 years, but well, yes, temporary, just short. There was going to be an end. The end is we have to find Ava. Once she is found or determined what happened to her, game over, and proof of concept is then done. And that was generally at least like a shared belief or understanding, I think, with a lot of people, is like, this will end, I think, including the employees, of which there were really only like a couple other folks that at that time opposed to the Latitude, which I think at one time had like, you know, tens of 20s of employees or something like that. So yeah, Jejune was done at a shoestring budget. There wasn't a giant haunted house that was constructed under the city. You know, it was about small installations and a lot of design and just video, and there was no like architecture necessarily, besides maybe there was a lot of art direction and interior design which came from Jeff, like around the room or, you know, stuff like that. But it was really about these little things that you find. I mean, there's stuff in the Institute that it just couldn't fit in, but were so brilliant, where it was like, you need to find the world's smallest post office. And they would install these little like mailboxes, you know, almost kind of the, you know, Thomas Pynchon's Crying of Lot 49, sort of the Thurn and Taxis, kind of like these two competing postal services. Anyway, so just all over the place, there would be these very small little like post offices, and you could literally deposit a little teeny tiny envelope into it, and it would go to where it was supposed to go. So I don't know, there was a lot of stuff like that, but it was all very micro, opposed to the grandness and large, I don't know, just the grandness of the Latitude. I think the Latitude was just too big.
Yeah, I got that impression too. So what I did after that, the conclusion I came to after that I thought the major part, well, when I saw what you did in 2013, then I thought, why did you stop? I mean, I thought, this is a gold mine. I can monetize this. It can carry on forever. So I had the idea that it can be self-funding and organic. I always tried to do my startup companies that way. I you know, under huge pressure to take on investors, I never did. I always grew them, and always had a rule that basically, you know, that's you can only grow on the revenue you earn. So you have to be revenue positive from the get-go. Now, as an internet entrepreneur, they think you're a complete crackpot.
I know.
Because, you know, people will give you 8 million and stuff, and it's caused a lot of trouble for me, that the money that people have basically offered has caused a lot of trouble and broken up one of my most successful companies, because I just didn't need it. But the you know, partners, it goes to their head, you know. And so they just get, but you know, if you can actually grow something organically, you're growing the value. And it's, the internet thing was completely wrong. This thing where you build Facebook and it never makes revenue for 20 years, it's complete nonsense. It's just a Ponzi scheme. But when I grew a company that way organically, and revenue positive from day one and never going into the red, just built it on earnings. It's slow, but the value increases phenomenally. So by the time, you know, basically I had investors pounding on my door to invest, and you know, getting huge valuations and stuff, where everybody else who's just trying to, you know, borrow money to become Facebook, and that just wasn't shaping. But so that's the way I thought, and I thought, well, in ARG, like you guys were doing at the Institute, that's, I can figure out how to monetize that. So the idea I came up with was you do a kind of a play money in the game. So you run with the play money in the game. So it's I've always hated blockchain, and blockchain. I just found out about it that time. I had a lot of people, oh, you're blockchain. Because they're like, no, as far as I can tell, it's an NSA sting operation. It doesn't scale. It's a vulnerable thing, and I think I've been absolutely proved right over the years, by the way. I've got into a lot of arguments for saying that, but the idea is that you have a kind of anti-Bitcoin. You have it centralized, and then the currency itself is like taggable, a bit like Twitter things where you can put a hashtag on the currency, so you can a bit of currency that you spend, the hashtag will stay with the currency and go through the network, and then the proof of work in sort of Bitcoin mining, I wanted it to be democratic and make all the players make it. So basically you create the currency by just scanning QR codes on people's phones and finding geocaches and stuff like that. So the money is created by play in the game. And then I thought, well, you give the thing value by having a little exchange on the back end where somewhere in a little dark corner, you have it actually exchanged for physical gold and silver. So you have a gold-backed currency, and I figured that's enough to run the whole game. It's a fake currency, so it doesn't get too in your face, and you never think, here's Halo 2 and buy the next Xbox. Everybody's waiting for an ad to come up, and you never have to go there. You can do fake products and stuff, and nobody can sue you because it's fake money. There's not a lot at stake. So that was my idea, and that's because I have a background in software. I spent the last 7 years or so developing the software for that first, because I figured that was the biggest problem. So it's all there. It's all basically can be activated at a flick of a switch. And then I started on the game side, and then well, to be honest, I got to 2018 and then basically decided that this is pointless because we're screwed. I turned into a complete doomer in 2018 and just said, like, everything I was trying to do is, we're not going to make it. It's just everybody's head's too deep in the sand. So I kind of packed it in at that point, and I've since revived it. Oh yeah. Well, I'm almost finished. So basically, I since revived it because I thought I owed it to people to tell them what I was doing. I had a small following and stuff on YouTube and stuff, and I thought I better tell everybody what it was about. And so, in starting to make videos to explain it, then it got bigger than when I was actually doing it. So I kind of got stuck into a new role of being a kind of a doomer agony aunt. So then I figured, well, so go ahead, Sophie. Yeah.
Just saying a cult leader.
Well, yeah, I'm trying to get out there. You can't help being a cult leader. I mean, I could tell Jeff Hull straight out. People want you to be a cult leader. You can't escape it. They want somebody to fill that role. Yep. It's a bummer of a role because they're going to put you on a cross at the end of it. You're going to wind up on the sticky end of a stick.
Well, that's also kind of the differentiator, just really quick, about cults and religions, with one exception, Scientology. But almost every single cult disappears when the leader, the Axis Mundi, disappears. Scientology was different, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But yeah, I mean, if Jeff was out, it was done. Luckily, luckily there was nothing like nefarious or anything. I mean, what I'm getting at is, I believe there could be a benevolent cult leader, like maybe Tony Robbins or something like that. He's maybe not super benevolent, but I mean, he's not out there like beating people or sexually taking advantage of his disciples or anything like that. I mean, I believe there can be a benevolent cult leader.
Yeah, I think so too. So what I tell people is I completely first own up to being a cult leader, and secondly say that it's a different kind of cult. It's trying to get people out of behaving cultishly. It's basically all cults promise kind of a rebirth and liberation, and so they it's to say your liberation is from this need to belong to a freaking cult. And I do believe that if you are successful in a cult, you should be kind of reborn and liberated from the need to be in a cult. So you're saying, my shtick is that our whole culture is a cult. You know, just the word culture and cultivating it, they all come from the same Sanskrit root, which is quell, which is interesting because it's the hub of a wheel. It's kind of like the center of a drain, which is rather interesting. And so everybody in a cult is circling the drain, and our whole global industrial culture is circling the drain because it is a cult, you know, and a snuff cult, I think, with that too. So yeah, I agree that it can be done. And so yeah, that's our experiment, and we're pursuing it, and it's starting to get interesting. So I'd like to know, you know, in future if we can talk again and
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I feel like in a lot of ways we just hit the tip of the melting iceberg, if you will. Yeah, there's
tip of the Greenland ice sheet. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, I mean, outside of ARGs, there's a lot of ways to subvert society and people's expectations. And if we talk again, I'd love to kind of go into, you know, the work that the Yes Men have done, and you know, even Andy Kaufman did, just that subversion of expectations. And I was lucky enough to get to create one of those a few years ago, right after the election. Or he really created this hoax that we were going to pay you to go protest Trump's inauguration, and using some very clever methods, it ended up getting national media attention. Ended up getting on Tucker Carlson, and just having this ludicrous moment interview, and you can check that out if you want. The endeavor.
Yeah, will. I didn't know about that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, you can look up demandprotests.com, and if you'd like to check out, you can just Google Tucker Carlson, DOM, D-O-M, Tullipso, Tullipso. You'll see a interesting little moment and a familiar face.
Did you fess up to being like a fake hoax, or?
Nope.
Oh no, you kept it straight.
Yep. 7 minutes.
So you basically Sacha Baron Cohen's Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, gosh, we should go into the brilliance of Sacha Baron Cohen as well, but unfortunately, I gotta run to another meeting. But I would be more than happy to talk again in the future.
Yeah, well, we'd love any advice you can give us and stuff, and we'd like to, you know, share our progress if you're interested in that kind of thing. But I would love to talk again. Right.
All right. Yeah, this was
excellent.
Really fun.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. It was brilliant.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you, Spencer.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Bye. Thanks so much, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.